Secretly recorded from deep inside the bowels of a decommissioned missile silo, we bring you the man, one single man who wants to bring light to the darkness and dark to the lightness. Although he's not always right, he is always certain. So now, with security protocols in place, the protesters have been forced back behind the barricades and the blast doors are now sealed. Without further delay, let me introduce you to the host of Hutcast, Mr. Tim Hutner.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. You can now take your post. Today on Hutcast, we have a special guest today, Gene German from www.permittocarry.us. That's 612-388-2403. Gene is going to update us on his training program and how it applies to you. Other states involved, check with your legals on those. There will be a disclaimer in front of each show so you guys know what and what not to do. Again, permittocarry.us. Look them up, check them out. This is a mini-series, guys, so you're going to have a number of shows behind this. Feel free to tune in. Thanks again for Hutcast. We'll be with you shortly. For home and workplace comfort, we here at Dependable Heating and Air Conditioning have over 30 years of residential and commercial experience in replacing, repairing, and doing general maintenance on your heating and cooling equipment. Call the experts at Dependable Heating and Air Conditioning. For all your indoor comfort needs, we are located in Coon Rapids and serve the entire Twin Cities area. Call one of our professional technicians today at 763-757-5040. That's Dependable Heating and Cooling. Again, 763-757-5040, Dependable Heating and Air.
Leosa Trainers Incorporated and its certified firearms instructors are not attorneys and therefore do not provide any specific legal advice. The legal information contained in this information is general, non-specific information and should not be construed as legal advice to be applied to any specific factual situation. As the law differs in each legal jurisdiction, it may be interpreted or implied differently, depending upon your location or your situation. This training is not a substitute for the advice of your attorney.
Okay, you guys are live with Hutcast. Today, we have Gene German from the Leosa. Did I say that right, Gene?
Well, it's Leosa, yes.
Leosa Trainers Incorporated. Gene, welcome to the show, and could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Tim. For most of my adult life, I was a commercial insurance broker. So I look at things a little bit differently in terms of risk management. And when we talk about personal safety, as an example, it's really just a matter of risk management. Everybody wants to be safe. It's the second most fundamental human need that we have after we're able to maintain body temperature and breathe and find food. Once that's happened, then the next thing that we're concerned about is being safe. And people have different ways of going about that. Some delegate that to the police department, and we all know how well that works. You can just look at the crime rate.
Oh, for sure.
And others of us take that on ourselves, because we all know that when there's an attack, there's always going to be a victim and a bad guy. But the police are not going to be standing next to me. Mm-hmm. So it's my responsibility to take care of myself.
Mm-hmm. Gene, I've got your laptop open in front of me, and you have your course that's laid out, and we're going to kind of go through this for you out in the world there. His unit is going to give us a timeline on how we're going to present this to you. So we're going to do the best we can with what we got. And Gene, we are on slide 1, and you've already introduced yourself. And we're going to slide 2, 3, survive an attack. Gene, tell me about goals and objectives in this program.
Well, our goals and objectives are a little different than what the states typically require for people to know in order to get permits or licenses to carry. Our goals and objectives really are to teach people how to survive an attack physically, morally, legally, and financially. And those are outside the matrix of most state legislatures. They want you to know how to, draw a gun and how to clean a gun and how to shoot a gun and a little bit about the state law. And how to store firearms, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
More the skills and drills things. And I think carrying a gun is 95% between your ears and about 5% on your hip. So if we can teach people how to survive, and today, you can just look at the police departments and what happens when a law enforcement officer simply does his job, and what happens to them. Well, as a citizen who's armed, I don't have a chance if I don't know how to do these things.
So keep your head on.
Keep your head on. Years and years ago, when I was a young man, a kid, my dad was a boxer, and he taught me a fundamental lesson about boxing. And it was the person who loses their head loses the fight. And when you're using lethal force, especially, the same thing is true. You've got to be aware of what you're doing and deliberate about what you're doing, because you're going to have to explain yourself. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're just flailing away, or you're just, shooting until, it goes click, click, click. There's a real good chance you're going to go to prison.
Excessive kill. I've heard that term. Is that an accurate term?
Well, excessive force certainly is. We're talking about a low frequency, high consequence event. So you don't get a do-over.
No.
And you're going to have to explain why you did what you did the way you did it.
And I'm sure to a whole lot of people who want to fry you because you hurt somebody's poor, innocent child who is a whatever dope dealer, whatever you call it.
Going to be an Eagle Scout the next day.
Yes, he's on TV and he's got the flag shirt, the whole deal.
Exactly.
Okay, so we covered our goals and objectives. We're going to move to the next slide here. Survive an attack physically, morally, legally, financially. I heard you say that earlier. Can you dive into that a little?
Well, yeah, I can. It's not okay for me to go around shooting people. I think everybody would agree with that. It's not okay to go murder someone. And I think everybody would agree with that too.
Mm-hmm.
And how am I going to get the money to pay for this? Because most homeowners and insurance policies have an exclusion for intentional acts. And if I have to defend myself, it's not accidental, it's very intentional. Well, oddly enough, there's exceptions in all three of those. There's the legislatures don't come up with ideas on their own. They get them from somewhere else. And the Judeo-Christian theologies really are the source of where a lot of our laws come from that deal with the intentional taking of someone else's life. There's really a kind of a moral responsibility for someone, for me, to not allow someone to wrongfully take my life. And in our religious theologies, they kind of carved this out, that if you're acting in self-defense, that's morally okay. Well, legally, states have enacted laws that say it's not okay to go around shooting people, but they also open up an exception. They call them different things. It's justification in Minnesota, and it's privilege in Wisconsin. But even the states recognize that you shouldn't be forced to allow someone to simply attack you and kill you without the ability to defend yourself.
Interesting conversation about that here. We're jumping ahead, but Kim Potter, she's one of the people that shot that Boy Scout in Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, whatever it was. And it's not like she went out intentionally. No, she's a peace officer registered by the state of Minnesota to not do this. Their whole job is to preserve life. And what's your 2 cents on that?
Well, we teach people in our classes that if you're going to carry a gun, you shouldn't carry alternative means of force. And one of the reasons is that you don't have to have a conversation about in a nanosecond why you decided to use one level of force over another level of force. And police officers are in a kind of a different situation because they have to carry different levels of force. And if she's using a taser and a handgun, you've got to know where that equipment is on your body. And you can't put it someplace where you're going to mistakenly use the wrong one. And it's difficult when you're under stress. Rational thought isn't there. You're acting basically on your training. And it's to me, it's difficult to put somebody in that situation and expect them to never grab the wrong tool.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's not like hiding this. She knows she did it wrong, and she's admitting that out front.
Right.
But there's a lot of people. I host some social media sites, and they want to call it murder, and I am pretty much, that will not happen on my sites. It isn't murder. She did kill him. She is aware of that. But murder shows different intent. What's your thought there?
I don't know that intent is the focus. We use murder and kill as interchangeable terms, and they're really not. When my wife and I go to Canada to fish, it's very intentional that I'm going to take some fish and kill them. I mean, you can't eat them alive. You've got to go fish and kill them. Mm-hmm. But, and the same thing when I'm putting stuff down in my yard to kill the crabgrass. You know, it's going to be dead. So to the fish and to the crabgrass, at the end of the day, the outcome is no different. What's different in murder is there's a component in murder that is missing in kill, and that's malice. There's no malice in my heart toward those fish or toward the crabgrass. I just don't want it in my yard. Mm-hmm. And I need the fish in the pan, and in order to get them to comply, you got to kill them. Well, that's to me the difference. I don't believe there was any malice in her heart when she was simply doing her job.
Very, very well said. Very well said. And again, a lot of people who are Kim associates listen to this this Hutcast, and they sometimes need a calibrator, and that was very well put. I got to commend you on that. So moving forward with this, to survive attack physically, morally, and legally. Okay, you covered some of that, right? And
financially.
Well, let's cover financial then.
Let's talk about that. As I said, there's an exception. I shouldn't say that. There's an exclusion in most homeowners' policies against me intentionally hurting somebody. And some policies, not all, but many policies have what we call a coverage grant at the end of that exclusion. And it says, these are manuscripted, so they could be different, but it says something to the effect that if the insured is using reasonable force to protect persons and property, we will not apply this exclusion. We'll basically remove it from the policy. Well, they don't determine that it's got to be a gun or your fist or a chair or a 2x4. They just say it's got to be reasonable force. So it's up to the actor, the person that's being attacked, the victim, if you will, to make sure that they use reasonable force to deflay that attack. So if somebody's attacking me with a fly swatter, I can't shoot them. I mean, there's a proportionality here that doesn't make sense. Okay. But if somebody is attacking me with a firearm, it would make all kinds of sense for me to use mine to stop that attack.
So you're touching on combat multiplication. You bring a knife, I bring a bat. You bring a bat, I bring a hammer. Until we get to the point where we have the equal amount of firepower or whatever that deterrence is. Is that what you're going with that?
For the most part, it's going to be up to the person to explain, as I said, why they did what they did as they did it. And if someone believes that the threat of death or great bodily harm is there, the state law in Minnesota says that I have the authority to take someone's life without their permission. I just have to explain myself. In other words, I have to have an actual and honest belief that was a threat that I was facing, that I was a reluctant participant. I didn't have any, I didn't provoke the altercation. You can't provoke something and then later claim self-defense. Mm-hmm. No other force would do. It had to be what it was. And retreat wasn't practical.
Given our conversation prior to setup here, we had a conversation about a relative of mine that got into a situation where he had to take a life. Mm-hmm. Now, I have briefed you on the situation. What's your thought there?
Well, hindsight's always 20/20.
Yep.
And unfortunately, everyone else is going to do that to me or to you or anyone else that uses force to defend themselves. All I can say is if I had all the facts and I was there and in a clear moment, you could see everything that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to weigh in and come up to the same decision that he made. I just have to go with if this is the situation that he's facing. Everything. There are very few bright lines. It's all shades of gray.
I can imagine.
So you're going to have to listen to why he did what he did, his explanation of it, and if it makes sense, then it was justified.
Yeah. I believe there was no choice in the situation. They broke into the house. Just for you listeners out there, 2 assailants broke into the house. They were going to steal. They packed it by the door. They called the police. They found, of course, he was driving by and saw the door was kicked open. And he wasn't the owner. He was the caretaker of the residence while the other family members were gone. They packed it by the door. They were coming back, called the police. Police says, "We will not sit on this. You have to deal with it yourself." And literally, that's what they said. "We will not sit here." And they came back to grab the stuff. Well, at that point, they had walked into the house again, re-kicked the door in. And my family relative says, "Stay right here. We're calling the police." And the assailant says, "No, you're not." But the guns were already drawn on the assailants because at that point they had crowbars and they had their equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "You're staying right here." The guy says, "No, you're not." He grabs the gun of the front end of a .44 Magnum and was going to take it from the relative. And at that point, he had to do the unthinkable.
Mm-hmm.
So that is for the people out there that haven't heard the story. You're right. What do you do at that point? And it was a financial burden. So I'm tying this together with what you just said. He had to spend a lot of money. The whole family did to try and get him out of this spot. And in the end, it was a justifiable shooting. The fact that the police were there, and this is like way back. This is nothing new to what the defund the police crap is now.
Mm-hmm.
And the police says, "Okay, we maybe should have sat on it a little longer."
Hindsight.
But it ruined him for life. I mean, he'll never forget, and nor should he. He's no longer with us on this planet. I mean, he's passed away since.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one of these situations where, what do? You're in the time. You're in the moment. You like you just said. And it was a very financial stress on them.
Well, I think these things can be managed if you know what you're doing ahead of time. Because waiting until after the gun goes bang, it's too late. And that doesn't have to happen in that order. You certainly can deal with this. I wouldn't dare carry a gun if I didn't know I had more money than I ever could need to extract me legally from a situation. It's not that I'm going to necessarily owe anybody anything. When George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin, by pulling the trigger, Zimmerman spent $3 million he didn't have. And he's still significantly in debt. Well, had he come to see me before this happened, all $3 million would have been paid.
I remember the George Zimmerman. They wanted to sell the gun on Gunbroker. And Gunbroker at that point grew a conscience for this weapon. What was it, a P380 or something stupid, some 9mm?
Yeah.
But they wouldn't sell it, and they would have gotten his defense fund covered.
Well, I don't know if he could have gotten a $2.5 million for that gun or not, but it would have maybe made somewhat of a dent in what he owed. But the point is that if you're properly insured, not just insured, but I mean properly insured,
mm-hmm.
The insurance companies will take care of this because defense costs are paid. It's a cost of business. They're not paid as a part of the limit of liability that you bought. So if you had a $500,000 homeowner limit on your liability on your homeowner's policy, and you had $3 million in attorney's fees to pay, the $3 million would be paid. So there's a way to do this, but you have to think about it before you decide to carry a gun. Because if you wait until after, as I said, the gun goes bang, it's a little late to be calling your agent to see if you've got insurance or not.
Could you briefly tell us the web address of your system?
Well, I have several. The one that I typically use for permit to carry training is permittocarry.us.
Mm-hmm.
That's permit2carry.us.
Okay, and they can reach you via that website?
Yes.
And you house classes or host classes how often?
I do them by appointment in my office.
Okay.
So it's really on demand.
Do you remote?
I don't. I've considered it, and I don't, because this is too participatory, I guess I should say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not standing in front of a classroom just lecturing. I need some feedback. I need some questions and concerns, and we talk about things. I don't have a large space for training. I can do 6 to 8 people at a time. So that makes it nice for families or friends and families to get together, if they'd like, or husband and wife for that matter. But I think you lose something in terms of being able to make contact with people, and it may not be able to draw out the same kinds of questions and concerns if they weren't sitting there.
I mean, remotely being, do you go to the people and how is it? Say they have 15 guys and they want you to come in front of their audience at their place. Do you do that?
I'm portable.
Okay, portable.
I'm portable.
I used the wrong word.
What I was thinking you were referring to is the Zoom meetings, which a lot of the instructors are going to now. And I think the quality of training is important. We aren't the cheapest. We don't mean to be. We've got a great value, I think, for what we charge. But I don't mean to. I don't want to compete with the guy that's charging $60, $70, $80, whatever he's charging.
Right. Yeah. Nor should you.
Well, they're not getting the training that I believe they should have.
Okay. We are on slide 6, and we are 19 minutes into this. I have to take a pause for my sponsors, and we'll come back and pick this up. Hutcast will be back in merely a moment. Stand by.
In today's busy world, staying healthy and alert have become essential for those of us who want to get the most out of ourselves. So before you reach for that energy drink, ask yourself, are you really giving your body the best? If you want the energy without the jitters that commonly come from today's most popular energy drinks, then reach for something better. Reach for Super Fuel. Super Fuel is made by Casmo Incorporated. Super Fuel is a healthy boost. Super Fuel is made with vitamins B6, B12, and taurine, that is a amino acid that aids in weight loss and protects heart tissue. Beetroot powder and other healthy ingredients that will give you a quick, healthy boost. Make Super Fuel a great tasting, low-calorie addition to your daily regimen. Super Fuel by Casmo Incorporated. It can be ordered by visiting our website at www.superfuel.me or calling 833-383-5912. That's right, Super Fuel by Casmo Incorporated at www.superfuel.me or calling 833-383-5912. Super Fuel.
And we are back with Hutcast. Hutcast today has a very special studio guest. Studio guest, tell us who you are.
I'm Gene German. I'm the president of Leosa Trainers, Inc.
Well, we thank you for coming in. And we had left off in section 1 with the safeties, the financials, the things that go along. And we're going to pick it up on our slide number 6 that we're following along. Gene, stage is yours. Let's talk about safety.
Well, a lot of people come to these classes and they have varying degrees of experience. Some people have minimal experience, and other people have been Marines and snipers and God knows what else. Trained many, many, many law enforcement officers over the years. So we have several things that we expect of people when they come to our class, and it doesn't matter how experienced or inexperienced you are. The first one and the most important one is that we don't want anyone leaving our classes with more holes in the head when they arrived. So this means no one's going to point a gun at anyone else. When we're on the range, we're going to, follow the range rules and be safe. I think that's really important. I don't want anybody to feel that they're in danger either in the classroom or on the range. And that means they have to follow directions. They can fail if they violate that, certainly. And there's 2 ways they can fail. And the second one is if they don't qualify on the range. The majority of the reasons that people don't qualify on the range is that they're holding the wrong gun. And unfortunately, when people go to buy guns, they buy them for all the wrong reasons. It's a gun their friends have, or someone else gave them this gun, or this was their parents' gun that they were, inheriting, or whatever the reason.
So one side doesn't fit all.
Well, they don't.
Okay.
Guns are like shoes. And if I couldn't trade shoes with the students in my class and they could wear the size shoes that I wear and I could wear the size shoes that they wear for the same reasons, you can't just pick up a gun and it'll work.
Mm-hmm.
It has to fit you. And gun dealers don't worry about if they're selling you something that fits you, unlike the little blue-haired lady at the shoe store that puts your foot up on the thing and measures you and makes sure that the shoe that she's bringing out is going to suit you.
Mm-hmm. Well, hold on now. You are talking to a gun dealer, a federal firearms licensed dealer. And sometimes you got to ask those questions of these people.
The problem is they don't know what to ask.
Mm-hmm.
For years, I would buy sneakers, and in 6 months, I was blowing out the sides. I went to the store where you picked out your own shoes. I thought I knew what I was doing.
Okay.
Well, my wife said, why don't you go see that little blue-haired lady at the shoe store and tell her what your problem is and see if she can't fix it. So she sits me down in the chair, and we measure my foot, and she brings me back these sneakers, and I put them on and walk around, and they felt okay and everything. And I looked at her and I said, are you sure that these aren't going to blow out in 6 months? She says, I'm pretty sure you're going to get longer than that. I said, why are you so sure about that? She says, because you're not a 9.5, you're an 11.
That'll do it.
And I didn't know that. They're my feet, and I still didn't know that. So guns are like that. If you don't know what to look for, you don't know what questions to ask.
Okay. Well, the professional at the counter should be asking you and directing you, at least as far as the gun side goes, and I can speak on this. You don't put somebody in a dirty Harry when they're 5'2" and can't get their hands around the gun. So I see that on a daily basis. But sooner or later, they're going to graduate and want something a little bigger.
Well, maybe and maybe not. And there's 3 legs to the stool. The grip, which is the width. It needs, when you hold the gun, your knuckles need to line up underneath the trigger guard. And when you touch the trigger, the gun has to force your finger to land halfway between the tip and the first joint. So you don't need to change it. It won't let you. It's just where the frame is going to be the right size if that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But we still don't know if you're any good with it.
Yeah,
so
right.
when you go to the store, you write down, take a piece of paper and a pen and write down all the guns that fit you, physically fit you. And if you're at a range where you can rent guns, go see how many of those they have that you can rent. And you put a silhouette target out 21 feet. You don't have to put it out 25 yards, but 21 feet. And point shooting, not using the sights, but just indexing with your hands so your fingers are pointing toward the target. You need to see which caliber you're competent with. And if you get to a larger caliber where it's not comfortable any longer, then perhaps you need to go back to the one that you were better with. And that should be your carry caliber.
Okay. And you said, how can you fail? What's that mean?
Well, just because people pay me, they don't necessarily walk off with a certificate that says they're qualified. So there's some expectations that they're going to behave, they're going to follow the rules, they're not going to point a gun at somebody else, and they have to show me that they're proficient with a firearm. The majority of the time when people aren't proficient with a firearm, as I said, it's because they're holding the wrong gun. I'll take it away and give them one of mine that may fit them a little bit better. It may not be perfect, but I've seen people that couldn't get a good shot group ace the test after we've just changed the gun. So that's important. I want people to succeed, but if they can't, if they're just not going to make it, we're not putting them on the street with a gun on their hip either.
I see. Next thing on your outline is breaks housekeeping. Define that.
Well, we take breaks every hour. Some of the material that we cover is pretty weighty. And I think people need a little time just to kind of air out a little bit and think about maybe what we've talked about. And obviously, people need breaks to, smoke or use the facilities, stretch their legs. maybe grab a banana, an orange, or whatever to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So it breaks up the day a little bit. We don't give them a half an hour break. We usually work through lunch. Have people bring lunches so they can keep going. Because if we take an hour for lunch, it just adds an hour onto the day.
Right. You also have in here, it says, what success looks like. What's that mean?
This is a very responsible activity. And if people don't understand that, I don't want them to get their permit. And to be honest with you, it took me a month to actually decide to carry a gun once I went through my class, because I was weighing the issues. Like I said, this is a low frequency, high consequence event if you ever have to use a firearm. But I want them to appreciate the seriousness of what we're talking about and accept it and embrace it. And if they don't do that, and I've had people go on a break and they come back and they say, we aren't coming back. We've learned enough about what you're talking about here that this isn't something we want to do. And I'm okay with that. That's an informed decision. And I've earned my money if that's what it turns out to be. But I want people to understand the gravity of what we're dealing with here.
Very, very interesting. Boy, after this, I'll have a second permit I can carry. Okay. You have in this slide, what will you know? I think we're covering that. I think we should move a little forward. What's your thought on that?
Sure.
Okay. So let's blow that slide through. Brief introduction to relevant Minnesota laws. Now, again, we are 8 minutes and 28 seconds into the second segment. Let's give this a touch.
Well, there's a lot of other statutes that deal with firearms or firearms-related things that people need to be aware of, because they, in one way or another, interact with what we're dealing with. So we want to talk to them about a few statutes that they should be aware of and how they interplay with the carry law. We also want to let them know about the importance of avoiding conflict and situational awareness. Those are two things, but if you get good at that, paying attention, avoiding conflict, de-escalating situations where it's possible, you minimize the need to take that gun out of its holster. And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
We do talk about the righteous use and threat of force in public and at home. The reason we do it this way is because they're not the same. What you're expected to do and how you're expected to behave in public isn't the same as how you're expected to behave at home.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to separate that and let them know what the differences are.
Give them a little bit of radar on that.
Well, it's important, because if you're going to use a firearm, you better understand what you're supposed to do and what the rules are. Because, again, this is a survival thing.
Okay, and you have let's touch on human target. I want to go back to situational awareness.
I'll touch on human target. The information that we share about the human target comes to us from the Handgun Wounding Factors and Effectiveness Report that was written by a gentleman named Yuri Patrick when he was with the FBI Academy in Quantico in 1989. And other than a couple of things that may have changed from in a societal setting, shooting a human being hasn't changed a whole lot since 1989. We are not talking about deer hunting or hunting ducks.
Mm-hmm.
Our target's going to be another human being that's looking at you and blinking back at you, and it's
potentially shooting at you.
So this is different than target shooting. So we want to talk about what to expect.
Okay. Back to situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people out there, they're not military trained. They don't have anybody that's given them this information. But from what I remember, the military situational awareness means that you have to predict, you have to anticipate, and if you're in that situation, you got to shoot, move, and communicate. Bring people up to speed on that, please.
Well, a lot of folks are walking around, to be honest with you, just being one level above a coma. Their faces in the phones,
mm-hmm.
or they're talking with somebody, or they're pushing their kids in the stroller, or they're just not paying attention. When bad guys are looking for a target, they're looking for people that are not aware of what's going on around them. if you act as though you're aware of what's going on around you and your head's up and you're looking around at people, the way you carry yourself can signal to the bad guys, this is probably not somebody I want to pick on.
Wrong target.
Wrong target.
Mm-hmm.
So being, situationally aware is just really being just that, being aware of what's going on around you, what is going on around you. If you're ever attacked, it would be helpful for you to be able to explain, this is the situation that I was in and how it developed. I guess that's it.
Okay. No worries. I've already bookmarked it, so we have that spot. All right. So the human target, deer ain't going to shoot you back. The ducks don't attack you, but someone who is marking you for a target will.
They will. And
with as much as is going downtown, you need to be hyper aware of what your surroundings. So I think you bring up a valid point. At what point should you not have your head on a swivel? And I think your course would focus a little bit of energy on that. Do you agree with that?
Well, again, it's a matter of knowing what's happening. You cannot shoot at a person or at a target without knowing and being able to identify it. And that also adds to that, what was the threat? How many were there? What were they doing? What were they saying? How are they behaving? What weapons did they have? All of that goes into situational awareness, because you're going to need to be able to explain how this developed and why you decided that the time was right to use force to stop it.
And the poor assailant who is a dope or drug or whatever they do, who wants to make you a target, will have the best attorney on the planet.
You will, and they're not going to announce what's happening. It's going to just happen. Mm-hmm. And you're going to need to be aware of where you're at and what you're doing in order to be able to react in time.
Okay, well, let's push this forward. We are 14 minutes into the second segment. The use of lethal force and crime. Let's start there.
It occurred to me, I openly carry a gun. And most people, when they see it, ask me if either I'm a police officer. Years ago, you wouldn't know this, but I had a ponytail and people thought I was a bounty hunter. I didn't realize there was a connection with ponytails, but there apparently is.
Was your codename Dog, or what were you at?
They thought it was, I guess. I don't know. But no one, when they've seen me with this firearm on, has ever asked me if I was a bank robber or a murderer or anything like that, any form of a bad guy. And I've thought about this over the years, and I think the reason is that I wasn't acting like one. So why would they assume that I was? Mm-hmm. Well, when you're using lethal force, there's things that we can imprint on our witnesses that will identify us as the victim. Mm-hmm. And if you do crime scene management following the need to use force, that's not bad guy behavior either. When a bad guy shoots an innocent person, they don't stick around and manage the scene. They get out of there. Mm-hmm. They leave. Mm-hmm. Well, if your witnesses are seeing what you're doing being different than what they expect a bad guy to do, if they just repeat what they saw you do when the police arrive, that'll go into the report. The district attorney will get that, and they'll go, I can't go after this guy. This is the victim. It's not the bad guy. Hmm. So this is, again, a matter of how you survive legally and financially getting out of this. If the district attorney gives you a no bill because he knows darn well that he can't win this case, your legal fees are going to be negligible. Mm-hmm. Because you're not going to go through the trial. If this goes to trial, you've done something wrong.
Now, you said you open carry.
I do.
A lot of people have that question, because I've been in several classes myself. When you say open carry to certain instructors, they get chills up their spine. Mm-hmm. They don't want people to open carry, because in their mind, they don't want to advertise to the bad guy that you're the first guy they're going to take out, so that this, let's say this active shooter situation goes on. You're the guy, he can see your gun, he pops you first and moves on. What's your thought?
There's a lot of information that I don't know where it comes from. It's certainly not from experience. I've been doing this since about the 1st of July of 2003, and that's not been my experience. I don't go places that I'm going to necessarily find problems to begin with. I try to avoid those because that just kind of makes sense. But we know that nationally, the statistics tell us that out of 100 we call defensive gun uses, 92 times, once the victim presents the gun to the bad guy, the attack breaks off. That's all that happens. They don't even have to pull the trigger. He just now knows that the victim's not defenseless, and the attack breaks off.
So wrong guy.
Wrong guy. 8 of the remaining 8, 7 times he's wounded, once he dies. So there's your 100. Well, I think I'm being preemptive, letting them know up front that I have a firearm so you can go pick on somebody else. And I don't have to take it out. I don't have to point it at anybody. I don't have to call the police. I don't have to get an attorney. I don't have to go through all the aftermath associated with having drawn my firearm.
And the aftermath of a defense gun use is your next point. Roll on that.
There's nothing good that emanates from the need to use a gun to defend yourself other than hopefully you're still alive. Nobody in their right mind would wake up in the morning going, I hope all this happens to me today, because it's all bad. It's all bad.
Not a normal person would want that, yeah.
I can't imagine why you would. I really can't.
Okay. And properly insuring yourself?
Well, we've talked about that a little bit. We aren't selling insurance, but I would suggest that people contact their insurance professional and ask the question, if I have to use a firearm or any level of force, and if you're in a bar and you hit somebody in the jaw with your fist, am I insured for that? And if you get a I don't know, or it all depends, or no, then you need to seek out an independent insurance agent that has carriers that would say yes, that could be covered.
And what would you ask the insurance guy? Hey, I need to buy gun insurance. So if I wipe somebody out, you cover me, or what's the question there?
Well, we're not asking for gun insurance. We're asking for self-defense coverage. It says if you're using reasonable force to defend yourself or others, then we're not going to apply the intentional acts exclusion. And there's a coverage grant at the end. I give my students a copy of my policy language with that coverage grant at the bottom of it, so they can actually take it and show it to their insurance agent and say, do I have this?
And is that available on your website?
No, that's not.
Okay, so you want to keep that proprietary, or do you want it out in the world?
Well, because we're not selling insurance, I really want to have that conversation face-to-face with people so they understand what it is that we're talking about. They also ask questions about what the alternative insurance coverages might be and what they might look like and how they're different and that sort of thing. So there's more to it than just showing them a piece of paper.
I see.
So I want to make sure that they're informed so that when they go talk to their agent, that they know what to ask.
Now, I did see that the NRA for many years has posted some types of, are you covered? Are you insured if this happens? And I know they had a program at one time. Is that similar to what you're talking?
Not at all.
Oh.
There's 2 types of insurance policies. There's a pay on behalf of, which is what people typically recognize as their homeowner's policy and their car insurance policy, and policies that will stand in your shoes and pay the bills as they come in. There's also a reimbursement form, which is what the NRA's policy does. So they'll stand back and say, you go ahead and pay everything, and when it's all resolved, if you're innocent, then we'll decide how much of this we want to reimburse you. So if it were George Zimmerman had that policy, he'd have to part with $3 million before the NRA stepped up to pay anything. So
that a win or lose for you is this NRA program?
I wouldn't buy it.
Okay. We'll qualify that as a lose.
Yeah. No, seriously, there are better choices. And as I said earlier, it's being properly insured, not just insured. When I changed my insurance from the company who would not do this to the one who would, my insurance premiums, not only did I get the coverage that I was looking for, but my insurance premiums went down $700 a year. Well, if you go to the NRA and say, I want this insurance, and I also want you to give me a check for $700, they're probably not going to do it. So there are better ways of doing it, I think.
Well, you've certainly opened my eyes to this. We've got to move on this. We are 22 minutes into segment 2. And what I'm going to do is we'll take a break, a word from our sponsors. We'll come back and we'll talk about routine police encounters and active intruders. And that's a wrap for HUDcast. Today on HUDcast, Gene German in www.permittocarry.us. Phone number there is 612-388-2403 in the Leoso Training Group. So again, for HUDcast, we hope you enjoyed this show. If you like us, give us a thumbs up and tell your friends. Again, this is a mini-series. We'll have another 4 or 5 shows to go. Hopefully we'll try to keep them short so you can enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Again, for HUDcast, thanks for tuning in.